Hi, I'm Ryan Reveley. I'm the pastor at Chaplain Bible Church, and I'm here with Figured Out Baseball with another devotional for you. When I was in high school, my dad and his friend took me and two other of my buddies to St. Louis to watch a St. Louis Cardinals game. Now, I'm not a Cardinals fan by any means. Neither was my dad. I grew up a Braves fan. My dad was a Braves fan since Milwaukee Braves days, and so I grew up watching the Atlanta Braves when they were terrible, and then I grew up in the '90s watching them when they just won the division every year. Went to the World Series so many times, but only won one. So it was bittersweet to be a Braves fan, for sure. But we went up to this Cardinals game because it was baseball. We love baseball, and it's just something fun to do with some friends. And there was a promotion that day, and it was called Camera Day. And if you had a camera, whether it was disposable camera, now if you don't know what a disposable camera is, it was literally what it sounds like. It was a camera that you could take pictures with, get the film developed, and dispose of the camera. You didn't need it anymore. So any kind of camera you may have, you could go down on the warning track on the field before the game, and the St. Louis Cardinals players would come around, and you could take pictures of them as they were walking around. It's kind of, thinking back on it was kind of an awkward promotion because these Cardinals players are just walking around. I'm sure they're used to getting their pictures taken, but it's almost like you're at a zoo and you're taking pictures of the animals that are walking around the zoo. I remember it vividly because it was Ozzie Smith's last year, and Ozzie Smith, as you may know, hopefully you do, he was Hall of Fame shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals for many years. He actually started with the Padres and then came over to the Cardinals. And so it was a great opportunity to see this living legend up close and the other Cardinals players as well. Now, what's interesting about professional athletes, and maybe you've experienced this, is when you see them on TV, you don't actually realize how big they actually are until you see them in person, until you see them up close. And these Cardinals players are walking around, and I've seen these guys on TV. One of the players I remember was Ron Gant, and he played for the Braves in the early 90s. And I always knew he was a big guy, but when you see him up close, he was a very large, well-built guy. Same thing with Ray Lankford and some others. As they're walking around, you're just like, man, how are these guys this big? They were really larger than life. Anytime you see an athlete or a celebrity, you're kind of taken aback a little bit because you've seen these people on TV, you've seen them perform, and they're just this larger than life figure, and maybe you build up this ideal of them or what they would be like if you met them in person. And I've had the opportunity to meet some athletes and things like that in my time with either baseball chapel or even before that when I was a kid growing up. My dad and I met Walter Payton one time. I'm a huge Bears fan now, and I remember meeting Walter Payton, and he was just a giant guy. He's just a big guy, looked like he could still play football, and this was long after he retired. The thing is about these athletes and these celebrities, there is a barrier there. There's this like imaginary barrier. Sometimes it's a physical barrier because they have like bodyguards and security. And when we were at the Cardinals game and you're standing there, it wasn't like you could just roam freely in the outfield or on the field. There was these ropes up, and so you had to stay behind the ropes. There was a barrier there. There was a distance there. There was a barrier that no one could cross, and if you did cross it, you'd be asked to leave. So the players are close, but not necessarily approachable. There is a celebrity, so to speak, very famous person who actually invites us to come near him, and one of the main way he did that was he actually came near to us. The God of the universe is really so far above us. He is so much bigger than we are, so much more powerful than we are, but he chose to be close to us. There's times in scripture where people come in contact or are somewhat close to the living God. If you know the story of the Exodus, when Moses led his people out of slavery in Egypt, he brought them to this mountain called Mount Sinai, because that's where God told Moses, hey, I'm going to send you into Egypt. You're going to tell the Pharaoh to let them go. I'm going to release the people. You're going to lead them right back here to this mountain, Mount Sinai. And so Moses went up on the mountain, and the glory of God descended upon the mountain, because God was going to give Moses the law, how he expected his people to live, his freed people to live. And when the glory of God descended upon the mountain, the mountain shook, and the people were very afraid. They were like, we're going to die here. They knew that there was this great distance, this great gap. They knew that the living God had come close to them. And even Isaiah the prophet, he sees a vision of heaven, and he sees God upon his throne, and he is overwhelmed, and he has said, I am a man of unclean lips, among a people of unclean lips. No, he's basically saying, I'm not worthy to be here. There's no way I should be here seeing this. And even in Revelation, the Apostle John, he is seeing this great vision of what's going to happen in the end. He doesn't understand it all. He doesn't understand all the symbolism. Even today, we don't understand all of that. And he sees this heavenly being approach him, this angel approach him, and he just falls down. He's like, I'm not worthy to be here. I'm not worthy. The people knew, the ancient people knew, when they had these encounters with God, that they weren't worthy, that they were near the living God, this what they thought was this unapproachable God. But God didn't stay that way, because he didn't just stop with being, coming close to us, because Jesus is literally known as Emmanuel, which means God with us. That's what the prophet Isaiah says. It said there will be, for to us a son is born, to us a child is given. And they called him Emmanuel, which means God with us. He didn't just come near us, but he made it possible for us to approach the living God. There's a verse in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. It says this. This is the author of Hebrews speaking to his audience, the people he's writing to. And he says, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Have you ever felt confident approaching someone? Maybe there was someone in authority, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's some other adults, or maybe somebody in this who has a high social status, whether it's a political status or a celebrity status, whatever it may be. You ever feel confident in approaching them? I don't think we often do that, especially if we've met them or meeting them for the first time. We feel nervous. We feel like we're not worthy to be in their presence because they're so far above us. But the author of Hebrews says this, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. So when he says, let us then, what does that mean? Let us then, it means because of what Jesus has done, because of our faith, putting faith in Jesus, we can approach the throne of grace, the throne that Isaiah saw, and he says, I'm a man of unclean lips. There's no way I should be here. But because of Jesus, we can approach the throne of grace with confidence, that we may receive mercy and find grace. Grace is something that's given to us that we don't deserve. We don't deserve grace. Mercy is love. It's oftentimes it's translated as a steadfast love. And steadfast love just means that God's love is never changing. God's love isn't like our love. It doesn't just go up and down like a roller coaster. God's love stays the same. The verse in Hebrews says that we can approach God's throne with confidence to find the grace that we don't deserve and the mercy that we so desperately want and need. All because Jesus gave his life on the cross for us and rose again from the dead so that we could have a new life if we put our faith in him, if we believe in him. And because of that new life, we are no longer separated from God. There is no more distance. There is no more sense of God is so unapproachable. God is so far above us. We don't have to stand in the presence of God and say, I'm a man of unclean lips, or I'm a woman of unclean lips, or I'm a kid of unclean lips. If we put our faith in Jesus, we stand there, and we may feel that way, but God is going to look at us as he sees Jesus as perfect. He's going to say, hey, you belong here. You belong here. I remember when I was a chaplain for the Lowell Spinners. I'm wearing this shirt, if you can see right here. In 2007, I started there. And I remember the first time I walked in, and it was this environment that I had never been in before. And a lot of these people I hadn't really met. And I had met the general manager. And before that first Sunday I went, because we did chapel on Sundays, Sunday home games. And so I walked in. I wasn't really sure where to go, where to stand. Am I going to be in somebody's way? I know they're working. They're trying to get ready for the game to start. And I just felt uncomfortable. And I remember the GM coming up to me, and he's a friend of mine to this day. His name is Tim. And Tim came up to me and says, hey, act like you're one of us. And that put me at ease for the rest of the time that I was there. When we put our faith in Jesus and we stand in the presence of God, and Jesus looks at us and says, hey, you belong here. Not because of what we've done, not because of accomplishments or anything like that, because just like as a chaplain, I walk in and it wasn't like I had done anything yet. It wasn't like I had proven myself that I belong there. Tim just came up to me and says, hey, act like you're one of us. And Jesus looks at us and says, hey, you belong here. There's no condemnation for those who believe in Jesus. That's what Paul says in Romans 8. So we can, because of Jesus, we can approach the throne of grace. We can approach God through prayer. We can approach him through reading his word. We can approach him through just spending time with him. There is no longer a barrier between us and God. So my question for you is, do you know that God wants you to approach him with confidence through Jesus? I've heard so many times from so many different people when I say, hey, why don't you come to our church? Why don't you come for a Sunday service? If I walked in your church, the walls would come crumbling down. That's not true. That's not true. Or I've heard people say, oh, I'm too far gone. No, nobody's too far gone. If you are breathing and you are alive, you are not too far gone for the grace of God. So my challenge for you today is memorize Hebrews 4:16. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Well, thanks for listening. I hope this has brought you some encouragement. I'm Ryan Reveley, pastor at Chelmsford Bible Church, and I'm here with Figure It Out Baseball.